Welcome to The Right Question. I'm Daphne Gray Grant, and my topic today is how to make Main Street more interesting. I have a question from Mindy Fullilove, a writer based in New Jersey. Here's what she's asked.
I'm writing a book about Main Street, and this involves visits to lots of main streets. I've been to main streets in about 150 cities, but some very particular visits where I'm sort of describing like everything that's happening on the street and the people I'm with, so it's in some detail. And I would like this to be lively so that the reader will be engaged. And any advice you have about how to make such a visit to a main street seem exciting, they are rather prosaic, I would be very grateful. Thanks.
Thanks for the question, Mindy. I think you've identified part of the problem when you say the topic tends to be rather prosaic. For anyone who doesn't fully understand the meaning of the word prosaic, it refers to text that's lacking in poetry. In fact, the root of the word is prose, which is sometimes seen as a synonym for something that's dull and commonplace. But Mindy, I'd like you to consider that the issue might not relate to the beauty or poetry of your writing. Instead, it more likely relates to whether you're doing enough storytelling. The topic of Main Street sounds a little bit static. It's a place filled with buildings, and many of them have been there likely for dozens, if not hundreds of years. You don't want your book to be a description of a bunch of buildings, do you? Instead, you need to look to the stories behind those streets. Human beings are hardwired to respond to stories. To us, they're like catnip to cats or herring to beluga whales. The idea for your book is very clever and should have the advantage of some sort of universal appeal. But to deliver a book that's interesting enough, you're going to need to look for the stories. I can probably best explain this concept by giving you an example. One of my favorite books, it's on my lifetime top 10 list, is the book The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, link below. If you haven't read it, rush out and get yourself a copy now. To me, the most remarkable aspect of this book is the way it's filled with stories. Let me take the time to read you quite a long sample now. This is from the beginning of the book. In the fall of 1993, a man who would upend much of what we know about habits walked into a laboratory in San Diego for a scheduled appointment. He was elderly, a shade over 6 feet tall, and neatly dressed in a blue button-down shirt. His thick white hair would have inspired envy at any 50th high school reunion. Arthritis caused him to limp slightly as he paced the laboratory's hallways, and he held his wife's hand, walking slowly as if unsure about what each new step would bring. About a year earlier, Eugene Pauly, or EP as he would come to be known in medical literature, had been at home in Playa del Rey preparing for dinner when his wife mentioned that their son, Michael, was coming over. "Who's Michael?" Eugene asked. "Your child," said his wife Beverly. "You know, the one we raised." Eugene looked at her blankly. "Who is that?" he asked. The next day, Eugene started vomiting and writhing with stomach cramps. Within 24 hours, his dehydration was so pronounced that a panicked Beverly took him to the emergency room. His temperature started rising, hitting 105 degrees, as he sweated a yellow halo of perspiration onto the hospital's sheets. He became delirious, then violent, yelling and pushing when nurses tried to insert an IV into his arm. Only after sedation was the physician able to slide a long needle between 2 vertebrae in the small of his back and extract a few drops of cerebrospinal fluid. The doctor performing the procedure sensed trouble immediately. The fluid surrounding the brain and spinal nerves is a barrier against infection and injury. In healthy individuals, it is clear and quick-flowing, moving with an almost silky rush through a needle. The sample from Eugene's spine was cloudy and dripped out sluggishly, as if filled with microscopic grit. When the results came back from the laboratory, Eugene's physicians learned why he was ill. He was suffering from viral encephalitis. In addition to the fantastic level of descriptive detail, did you notice how Duhigg employs tension, the same sort of tension a novelist might use? What is EP's problem? Why doesn't he remember his own son? What could be going on here? I can't imagine many readers being willing to put down the book until they learned how EP's story turns out. See if you can employ some of these same techniques in your own writing. Look for points of tension in your main streets. Is there a building that's going to be torn down? Is Jackson's Bakery going to go out of service? Is 10-year-old Joey Jones, who's walking down the street, going to be accepted to his local softball team? I can't predict specifically what types of stories you might have been able to find, but tell them in ways that allows you to hold certain specific key facts until you're able to engage your readers. Check out Charles Duhigg's book and read how he managed to accomplish this task. Then emulate him. Finally, let me wrap up with a quote from Pulitzer Prize winner Robert Olin Butler, author of A Good Scent from a Strange Mountain, link below. Story is a yearning meeting an obstacle. Mindy, many people seem to believe that good writing comes from flowery images and carefully chosen words. Instead, I believe the vast majority of readers prefer interesting characters in challenging situations. Present more tension in your writing, and your readers will automatically become more engaged.